right, let's bring in Fox News contributor Joe Concha. Joe, welcome to the program. And news from your Fox colleagues that the House Judiciary Committee is considering subpoenaing Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg and other former New York prosecutors to testify about their role in indicting Donald Trump. Got to ask you, Joe, should Bragg be worried about this, or does this just represent a further politicization of the justice and political system in the U.S.?
Honestly, I think everything on both sides is for show, right? The Alvin Bragg attempted prosecution, political prosecution of Donald Trump is for show. If you watch American media, and it's very divided over here, and usually one side takes one position, another side takes another position, or one network takes one, another network takes another. Rarely have we seen agreement across networks like Fox, CNN, MSNBC, CBS, NBC. If you listen to legal analysts on all those networks, they almost all say that this case is beyond weak, pathetically weak, should never have been brought forth in the first place. So on Bragg's part, he's doing this, I believe, just for show, just to drag out and drag through Donald Trump's name while he's a presidential candidate. So this hangs over him for the next 9 months, because remember, the jury trial is not supposed to happen until January of 2024. What happens then? That's when the first votes are cast in Iowa. And then Republicans, they have to do something in response, particularly in Congress. So they could drag Bragg up there and ask him why he's going about doing this when almost no one thinks he should. And he'll say, well, no one's above the law, and I have to do my job as a district attorney. There'll be some yelling back and forth, and nothing will change. So that's where we're at this point. A hot mess of a dumpster fire here in the United States.
Absolutely it is. And I remember watching, some of the CNN commentators when the indictment came down, and they looked at it and they all got this crestfallen look on their face like they'd just gotten bad news from home or something. But even though everybody has agreed that this case is pretty much bogus, other people are saying that some of these other cases, including the Georgia election case, could be real trouble for Donald Trump. Are we missing the main game here in participating in this Alvin Bragg circus?
I wonder, right? Jonathan Turley, who's my colleague both at The Hill and at Fox News, believes the Georgia case is pretty weak as well. If that whole case is predicated on the fact that on the phone, Donald Trump said to the Secretary of State of that state, you have to find 12,000 votes somewhere, you can interpret that 100 different ways. Donald Trump is many things. He's candid, he's authentic in terms of his principles, and he says things that can be inelegant sometimes. So if you just look at that on its face, and you could come to a couple of different conclusions. I believe Trump was just saying that, look, we need to find 12,000 votes in terms of were votes changed in some way, shape, or form, because remember in Atlanta that night, there was a water main break where suddenly voting had to be stopped. Then they started in the morning, and then obviously Biden eventually won that state. I'm not saying that there was any sort of conspiracy going on there, but at the same time, in terms of absentee ballots, in terms of all these things that you could interpret Trump's comments on that being a problem, I don't know if that holds water legally, but it does have at least a little bit more standing if you listen to legal scholars as far as that could be a problem for Trump. Or the documents at Mar-a-Lago appears to be the most worrisome to Trump as far as those classified documents ending up there are concerned. But again, you could point to Joe Biden having documents in 5 different locations, much less secure, that he took not only as vice president, but as a senator. So if you're going to charge Trump there, okay, but you better do the same thing to Joe Biden and, by the way, to Mike Pence, who also suddenly found classified documents that he shouldn't have had. In other words, it seems like everybody is doing this. So I don't know if any of this with the American people, the court of public opinion, it holds water as a high crime to the point that you take out a presidential candidate who happens to be a former president.
Well, exactly, Joe. And I mean, that whole thing about the perfect call, Donald Trump called it during his speech the other day after his arrest at Mar-a-Lago. He called it a perfect call, even more perfect than the one that he had with Zelensky. But the media coverage around this has been really interesting. And I want to play a little bit of what CNN's Rachel Maddow said when Trump was giving that speech. Have a listen to this.
So far, he's just giving his normal list of grievances. We don't consider that necessarily newsworthy, and there's a cost to us as a news organization of knowingly broadcasting untrue things. So our deal with you is that we will monitor these remarks. If he does say anything newsworthy, we will turn them around and report on that right away. But for now, just know that it's happening, and we're not taking it.
Joe, not newsworthy. I mean, this is the first former president ever to get indicted, and they're not taking the speech. This is absolutely Soviet. What's the fear that a CNN viewer might hear something and go, oh, I'm MAGA now?
Yeah, that was actually MSNBC with Rachel Maddow. CNN
Sorry, MSNBC. Yeah.
They get a little. It's hard to tell them apart sometimes. But in this case, do you see the smugness, the condescension that you hear from Rachel Maddow, who lied for 3 years about Trump colluding with the Kremlin and that the Kremlin actually installed Donald Trump into the White House? And that's the thing about all of this, right? In 2016, Hillary Clinton said that Donald Trump was illegitimate and that the election was stolen from her. Multiple news organizations said that the 2016 election was hacked. What does hacked means? That means you enter a computer unlawfully, or in this case, voting machines unlawfully. So all the election deniers of 2016 get a standing ovation for standing up. But in 2020, obviously, that gets turned on its head. So it's just funny that Rachel Maddow actually called MSNBC a news organization when they are anything but in this situation. You know that because Rachel Maddow was the lead anchor on the night of Trump's arraignment. It's Trump arraignment syndrome at this point. It's like derangement, but now it's arraignment. And it's still syndrome, though.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And actually, Trump arraignment syndrome, that spells TASS, which was the old Soviet news agency. So I actually think that there's a great connection there.
I hadn't considered that.
There you go. But so just finally, though, I want to just go back to Alvin Bragg for a second. I mean, he is known now for his soft on crime policies. His day one address to his prosecutors was, we're going to basically downgrade everything. And a rap sheet has been released of the 10 worst criminals who were repeatedly released by the Manhattan DA while he was focused on his whole get Trump agenda. How would people in New York who have to go through, you know, crime on the subways, all this mayhem in the streets, how could they not be furious that the DA is focused more on getting Trump than getting criminals off the street?
They should be absolutely furious. There was a CNN poll that said that 76% of Americans find that this investigation, this indictment, this arraignment of Donald Trump is politically motivated. Yeah, it should be like 96% because obviously that's the case. Here's the bottom line. More than 4,000 New York City police officers, NYPD, resigned last year. Why is that? Because, and I know several, used to work in the city, or I live in the city myself. I still work it on a daily basis. And they will tell you that they work their butts off to arrest the same criminals over and over again. And then 2 days later, they're arresting them again. And these aren't guys that are stealing a pack of gum from the local pharmacy. These are violent criminals that Alvin Bragg is releasing back onto the streets. He is moving felonies down to misdemeanors, but with Donald Trump, he moves a misdemeanor up to a felony. Why? To get his 15 minutes of fame and to drag Trump through the mud on behalf of Democrats. So the story becomes Donald Trump and not the current guy in the Oval Office polling as low as he ever has as president, Joe Biden. This is all to deflect away from Joe Biden and nothing more.
Joe Concha, it is an absolute disgrace. Thank you so much for your time, and a very happy Easter to you.
Happy Easter to you, sir. Thank you. Good Friday as well.